Welcome to NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we're doing a joint episode from the guys, the authors of the Peebcast. And so the Buffalo Bills and San Francisco 49ers are what we're talking about this week. And I'm excited to have you guys on. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
So first of all, before we kind of get anything into, specifics, how did you guys start your podcast?
So I started almost a year ago to the date. I threw out a post on Facebook, really, during the pandemic, and my wife was just getting tired of hearing about me talk about football. So working from home, you don't get that same stuff that's in the office, talking with your friends every day, who's going to go do what. So I just put out a little kind of feeler on Facebook and said, hey, you guys know I love football. If I did a podcast, would anybody want to listen? And it was an overwhelming response from people on there. So I just did it. And the first one was horrible. I went through all the stats. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take the off season. I'm just going to try to get as good as I can with this whole thing. And then I got through about 8 months of it, got into the season. And then I switched places within my job where I was working with a bunch of different people. And I met Ronnie. And Ronnie's like the Buffalo Bill version of me, maybe a little bit older because he's got, a little gray there.
A little bit.
Yeah. So we just started talking and I was like, yeah, I'm looking for a partner to do this with. And he goes, well, if you're asking, I'm in. So then we just started doing it and it's been a blast. So still relatively new to it, but we absolutely love talking about football. And of course, when it gets into the playoffs, that intensity kind of picks up a little bit, but it's been fun.
Yeah, tell you what, as I always say, any day I get to talk about football, it's a good day.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
And obviously, I mean, we can get into stuff here, but were you guys sweating out that it would be a Niners, Bills Super Bowl at one point?
We were hoping that was the dream.
That would be the dream matchup. Absolutely.
We both really felt like that this was our years, and unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. But it's going to happen eventually, right?
Yeah, there was a hope/dread in there because I know that both of us, how intense of fans we were. There were preliminary discussions, I should say, of okay, are we going to watch this together? If we do watch this together, you got to know I'm going to celebrate. You got to know that I'm going to say something, and I don't mean it personally.
Oh, yeah.
So there were those kind of talks. So we actually felt like it was going to happen. Chris Berman thought it was going to happen for 7 years and it never did. I thought that it was going to happen this year.
Yeah, and let's get right into that, why it didn't happen. We'll start with the Bills, right? So talk about, this season and, just kind of going through, it was an up and down season, right? And then it really kind of took off toward the end and Josh Allen really, became that guy. And then talk about then your emotions with how it ended.
The emotions. Tearful, we'll just say that. So the start of the season, after last season and the run to the AFC Championship game, I think the Bills Mafia as a whole was really excited, thinking this was it. We took that next step, one more step, and we're there. And you're right, the season was kind of up and down. We win one, we lose one, we win one, we lose one. And that kind of started after the Chiefs game. We won that game, I believe, 38-20. And then we started kind of up and down all season long. A lot of that could be contributed to the offensive line. There was some issues there with injuries, COVID, and and Brandon is the same way as me. You got to have an offensive line because that can really change everything either way. But yeah, coming down the stretch, they finally started getting it together. I believe I want to say it was the Patriots game, the second one. We had two guys out on the offensive line. They had to call up Ryan Bates and plugged him in there, and that offensive line with him in there suddenly just gelled. They kind of took off. They didn't lose the game again until the playoffs. So we got there, and the way they handled the Patriots was fantastic. But then, that Chiefs game, 13 seconds.
Well, yeah, let's go to that. With that 13 seconds, what was the right choice there? I mean, obviously we know what happened. I mean, was that the right choice, given, knowing the Chiefs returners and knowing maybe they could have been a little bit closer, even if there was a squib kick? What was the right choice kind of as the fan, as you were watching it?
I think as a fan, honestly, I would have been fine either way. And from what I understanding, there was a squib kick called. For whatever reason, that did not get to
Oh.
Tyler Bass, and so he kicked it out of the end zone. But I've told people all this ever since then. Any decision you make, there's a risk. The
Mhm.
squib kick, you could hit one of the up men, and then they get the ball at midfield. Or maybe
Mhm.
he recovers it and he still returns it 30 yards and they're at midfield. There's so many different things that could go right or wrong either direction, no matter what you decide. So I think as far as the kick, not necessarily that big of a deal. What they chose to do defensively in that 13 seconds, that I think is what ended up costing us.
So, I mean, this loss, is it more on kind of the defensive scheme or kind of the players of how they executed that last 13 seconds as a defense?
I think it's on the play calling.
Mhm.
Brandon and I went back and we're kind of looking at the all 22, and they were playing way too far back. And I understand that Tyreek Hill's got some speed, and you got to respect that, but you also can't just let him run free. And that's what they did. Same with Kelsey, both of them wide open, and not to take anything away from Mahomes, but he took what the defense gave him, which was some dump offs essentially, and then those two guys did the rest.
Was it hard watching it again?
Oh yeah. So we were together watching the game, Brandon, myself, and the wives, and the next day, my wife and I actually watched the whole game again,
Mhm.
and we got to basically the 13 seconds, and then we turned it off right there because we know what's going to happen now. But doing the podcast and everything, and this is the part for me that I didn't realize was kind of going to be a thing. Sometimes you don't want to relive things, but doing a podcast, you have to.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
so we watched it again, taking notes and whatnot. But it was painful, and uh, easily the most painful loss for me as a Bills fan. And I grew up during the Super Bowls and in the '90s, so
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you really you look at that, and I I was watching it, and I like to see different teams, win, and the Bills have kind of had I've been rooting for them. I like obviously I grew up with the '90s as well, and saw those teams lose, and it was just like oh they coming through, and I really like Josh Allen, and I was like oh they're gonna do this,
yeah,
they're really gonna do this, and I was watching with my son, and I said wow, Josh Allen just seemed to like take that step, like he kind of what it was almost like this season, you were kind of waiting for him to do that,
yeah.
you have the Jacksonville game, you have these different games, you're like, oh, maybe he's not that guy, and so like, in that moment, you know, did he become kind of that guy and can it, you know, hopefully, carry over into next year?
I think it will.
Hmm.
We'll have to wait and see, but towards the end of the AFC Championship game the other day, Josh Allen tweeted out just one word: pain. That's all he
Hmm.
said.
Yeah.
And I think he and the players, the team as a whole, are going to really like hold on to this all off season. And as a fan, it kills you. It hurts you. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we lost this game. I can't wait till the next season starts. And if I'm feeling that way, the players has got to be tenfold. I
Hmm.
can't imagine what they're experiencing right now. And I do think it will carry over. It'll be interesting and fun to see what pieces they can add to the roster to maybe take that next step. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think this is the next Brady and Manning in the AFC is going to be Mahomes and Allen. I think we're going to see that for a really long time. Um, as
Hmm.
Ronnie was saying, he just hopes that Allen gets to be the Brady and not the Manning and only get one. Where
Right.
Brady's winning all these other ones. So hopefully it's at least a little bit more even. But I mean, from my perspective, it was a tremendous game. I mean, to
Oh,
watch
absolutely.
and how back and forth it was. I felt pain for my buddy, and I mean, when they scored, when there was 13 seconds left, I'm thinking it's game over. And Ronnie was one that was going, "Hey, hold on," and I'm going,
Yeah.
"What are you talking about? 13 seconds left. He's going to at least have to go 70 yards." So,
Yeah.
but there's a nice little dent on your couch from.
Hey, let's not talk about that.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, I mean, as a friend, I mean, and we'll get to you later here, but with that last 13 seconds and when that happened, I mean, do you just not say anything? Just kind of walk out of the room and
You know, it was really tough. So my father, he's a huge Buffalo Bills fan. So I was
Oh, cool.
around him when, they came back from the Houston Oilers, and my uncle is a huge Houston Oilers fan. So
Mhm.
that was a domestic deal, that
Oh,
that
yeah.
game back in 92 or whenever it was. So I immediately thought of my father, and I thought of Ronnie, and I know how it is when you lose. And I actually, Ronnie and I were really close, so I felt that for him. Like I
Mhm.
felt like a pit in my stomach, and it kind of was, oh man. And the next day I'm checking on him. Are you good? Did you sleep last night? Those type of things, because I
Sure
know
did
how
not.
I am. I'm up, I'm pacing, I'm watching that game again, thinking about every other thing. So as his friend, I definitely felt it. And then I almost felt guilt that my team went on. That I was like, okay, we got to talk about this. I'm still excited.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But
he
yeah,
you
it's tough.
you bring up the sleeping part. So that night we did go to bed. I fell asleep for maybe an hour. I woke up, go back to sleep. So I got up again and I went and cleaned up the kitchen like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm sure my
Mm.
wife was happy for that, but so I did that and then went laid back down. Still couldn't sleep. I was in and out for the last 3 hours of the night, and yeah, it was rough. I had multiple people checking on me the next day.
Uh, tell you, and the only time I've really felt that is I'm a Cubs fan, and just that whole 2016 series with the Indians,
Mhm.
and just that up and down, and then that last, it just that I get that kind of adrenaline. Obviously, I saw it from the positive side, but I didn't think that was going to happen, and. And that I'm sure that's probably a tough thing is when you think it's going to happen and it's kind of just like pulled out from under you, you're like, okay. But when you talk
Yeah.
about the players, then I obviously, I can't imagine all the work that kind of goes into the whole season, and then just to kind of be over just like that. And so what I did want to talk about then kind of going into next year, what do the Bills need to kind of get over the hump the most in 2022?
Well, I think they have a lot of really great pieces in place. I think Gabe Davis is going to be, he should be the number two opposite Diggs next year, and I think he's going to
Hmm.
break out. I was a little disappointed actually when they brought in Emmanuel Sanders at the beginning of this year, just because of what Davis did as a rookie last year.
Hmm.
But I do think he will take over the number two. Dawson Knox, I think, will continue to emerge. Josh
Hmm.
Allen is Josh Allen. So I'm really happy where they are as far as the skill position players. I do think they can continue to improve the trenches, though. Another piece or two on the offensive line. And the defensive side, there might be some guys there, but they're young. We're talking about first, second, third year players. And a
Hmm.
lot of times defensive linemen don't really come out until third, fourth year. So we'll have to see what happens there. But I wouldn't mind seeing them go out and get a Von Miller in free agency
Mm,
this year. That would be nice.
I
that'll
hear
be
he'll be
interesting.
available. Hopefully, he can get out of the NFC West. He'll be fine.
Well, speaking of kind of, coaches getting out, Dable has moved on to New York now. So how will that offense look now losing Dable and now with the new offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey?
I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes there.
Hmm.
Dorsey's been the quarterback coach there since Allen's been was drafted.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of the same principles that Daboll had, he'll probably bring over. I'm sure with any coach, they're going to kind of tweak it here or there, make it their own. But I'm not concerned about it. Had Daboll left, say 2 years ago, I
Hmm.
might have been concerned. But I think Allen's at the point now in his career and his development that he can stand on his own. And he's still going back to California during the offseason, still works with Jordan Palmer. So his quarterbacks coach moving up to the OC, I think it's a nice seamless transition, and I don't really anticipate there being a whole lot of changes with that.
One thing I
Yeah.
do like about the Ken Dorsey move is that I'm always a huge fan of an offensive coordinator who had played the position before when they're speaking to the quarterback. So Ken Dorsey, obviously, we know he's played the game, he's seen the game of how Josh Allen is going to see it. So I think that's actually going to be a huge benefit to how they're able to communicate with what they're being able to see out there. And all that. I think they might actually be able to communicate maybe just a little bit better from former player to player and now offensive
Yeah.
coordinator in Ken Dorsey.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about quarterbacks as well, kind of getting into that, you know obviously, Ken Dorsey is definitely, he's, with the national championship, right? I think that's, important when you're talking to quarterbacks. But looking at the AFC, I mean, Josh Allen's, obviously coming back. He's going to be one of the top ones. When you look at all of these quarterbacks, I mean, Lamar Jackson's kind of, fallen down a little bit, because he's been hurt, but he's still there. You got Mahomes, Herbert, and I put it here, Rodgers, just in case, maybe he goes to Denver, right? But where does Josh Allen rank kind of in that conversation? He did get beat by Mahomes, but is Allen kind of taking that step where maybe he is above Mahomes?
I think you can certainly make an argument for that. At the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, though, people are going to say they're going to look at the MVPs, they're going to look at the Super Bowls, and that's totally fine. So for now, we'll say he's number 2 behind Mahomes. But I think just pure skill sets, talent, arm strength, all of that in one. I do think that overall talent, Allen is the better quarterback.
I would say exactly, and it's interesting, when a player has done it before, you trust him more, right?
Right.
And it was interesting. Obviously, the Chiefs had an up and down season as well, but you keep hearing nationally that, oh, they'll be fine because he had done it before. Do you think this, Josh Allen's performance in the playoffs, that he will start to get more of that benefit of the doubt, then that he can do this?
I think he will. I do think there needs to be a little bit more work in that regard,
Mm-hmm.
especially the national media. They do. I mean, because Mahomes has been on the national stage for a while, and we can't have Josh Allen having games like he did against Jacksonville,
Mm-hmm.
or I can't remember who their opponent was later in the season, but he threw 3 picks. I think it's Atlanta. Atlanta, he threw 3 picks in that. So games like that, he's got to get away from that. And I think once he does that, I think he takes that next step overall.
Absolutely. Well, let's kind of go, into the, 49ers, and, as we kind of, switch everything here, with the 49ers, we'll just kind of do a transition here. What do you see kind of, when you look at the season, do you see it as like a success, or what do you see from this season in that tough loss in the NFC Championship?
Yeah, I definitely think that it was a success. It's hard after a loss when you can start to see the Super Bowl right there, with even within a half of football or whatever it is. And it's easy to say, okay, well, we didn't get there, it's a failure. But it's all about the journey. And this team was 3-5 at one point, and people were writing them off. Their local media was writing them off. National media was writing them off. Should they go to Lance? Are they sticking with Jimmy too long? What's going on here? Fire Kyle Shanahan. There was all that talk that was going around. For that team to endure that adversity and stick together and to be able to go on this run, I thought was amazing. They did something that not a lot of teams had done. Actually, nobody had ever done, is go on the road and beat 3 12-win teams in a row. And the Rams would have actually been the 4th had they done that. And they came pretty close to doing that. So I definitely think it was a success. If you were to tell me in September that Lance was really going to sit and he's only going to start 2 games, and that was really out of injury necessity instead of performance necessity, and that Jimmy was going to go through and they were going to go into the NFC Championship game, you would say that that's a success. Trey got to see what that stage is like. He got to watch Jimmy prepare and all that stuff. So I think for the future, it's a huge building block. I actually think that they overachieved in certain spots, because they were a minute and 47 from not making the playoffs in week 18 to all of a sudden we're making the playoffs. Now you're playing Dallas. Now you're a road dog there. And then you go to Lambeau, you're a road dog there. You need a special teams play to make it there. And to have an opportunity to play in the NFC Championship game and the way that they were able to go, I think this season was a huge success.
What was more surprising? Was the Packer game and how it switched like that, or how well you handled the Cowboys and all that? Because I mean that, which was more surprising, one of the 2 games?
I would definitely have to say the Packers because I did not see a 10-10 ball game.
Right.
Which way that was going to go. If you were going to tell me that they were going to hold Aaron Rodgers to 10 points, I would think, oh my gosh, we must have blown them out again, like they did a couple of years ago. So the way that game went, that was extremely different. The 49ers struggled in special teams all season. The only reason that they shined through is because the Packers didn't. They sucked worse in special teams.
And they fired their coach today. So
yeah. So
yep.
There were some things that were opportunities for the Packers that the 49ers were able to take advantage of. I actually really liked the Cowboys matchup for them. I thought they matched up really well with the style of football that they play. I didn't feel that Dallas had really played anybody that would really punch them in the mouth all season. They play in the NFC East. And if you looked at their schedule, the teams that they did play, they actually struggled against Tampa Bay early on in the season. And it's hard to gauge that as you kind of go through 18 weeks. But even in that first game, you could see that Tampa Bay was more physical and they struggled with that. They struggled down the road. So I liked that matchup, but holding Aaron Rodgers to 10 points was extremely surprising, especially after that first drive when I go, uh-oh, this is going to be a problem. We don't look like we're out there and had that energy. Maybe last week took a lot of energy out from the 49ers, but I think the weather played a factor in it. I think the way the defense was flying around. I also think the familiarity between the coaches helped and turned it into a little bit more of a defensive battle. It's cold, it starts snowing, and then what happened. So that game was a big surprise in how it played out.
Yeah, and I was rewatching that, and actually, obviously, my son's a Packer fan. It was Saturday night, and so I told him he could stay up. He just kept staying up, and I'm like, it's getting late, So I put him to bed, and he's like, oh yeah, the Packers are going to win this. I'm like, yeah, sure, yeah. And so, as soon as he went to bed, and I turned the volume down, and that's when the block kick happened, and I'm like, I'm not going to react. I'm not going to, as a Bears fan, I obviously. I enjoy when, but and so that happened. But you rewatched it as well. I kind of went, and obviously you look at it and kind of do because we do our NFC North podcast, so I had to rewatch it, and I excitedly rewatched this one. But when that fourth down happened, I'm like, oh, okay, they can't move it. Jimmy G, can't do anything. And then he had, obviously early on, he had that interception, and it's just like they were not able to do it. And so it almost had to be that defensive play, and they actually almost had to run it in for a defensive touchdown to actually make it happen the way their offense was going, didn't they?
Yeah, and Kyle Shanahan actually made that comment. He said, I'm actually really glad he scored because I was not ready to try to get it in from the 5, in 3 plays or 4 plays because they were not able to move the ball. And actually at that time, if you look back at it, and even on the all-22, the footing was getting very slick. So anything was going to happen, whether a receiver's falling down. You even see that like on that final drive when they're going down for the final kick, when Debo goes for an arrow route from the backfield, and people are sliding everywhere with the snow on the field and whatnot. So it was a play that actually had to have, they needed to have, and Jordan Willis wasn't even supposed to be in on that play. The one that blocked the kick, he originally wasn't supposed to be in, and all of a sudden Tim Hightower, which is the special teams coach of the 49ers, said, hey, I want you to go in and rush this long snapper because we're able to get to him, but I need somebody bigger to be able to push him back to maybe try to get the block. So they put Jordan Willis in on that play, who hadn't played at all on special teams, and went in there and was able to make it. So it was just one of those things through coaching, through all that stuff, just a freak thing that happened, and they needed it. If we didn't block that punt, I don't think that they were going to win the game. I think the Packers are able to sit on it. I didn't feel confident in how we were moving it. You'd be able to get down there, but inside the 20 was different. It wasn't like you were going to be able to make a ton of things happen.
And that's tough in the NFL. That's, obviously quarterbacks talk about, like, I think even, Tom Brady talked about like how much more difficult that is, in the NFL, the red zone. And it just, you got all these amazing athletes, and but when you look at just the probability of that win, it didn't seem like it was going to happen, but it did. And so you can look at luck and stuff like that, but good teams win these type of games, don't they?
They find a way.
Yeah,
Right.
they find a way, and that was the thing where as it kind of played out, that it just felt like, and I mentioned to Ronnie, he said, "Careful with that word destiny," because
Ah,
it felt that way. It really felt that way, that they had overcome so much adversity. The Week 18 game against the Rams, there was actually a lower probability of them coming back and winning that game after they punted with just over 2 minutes left. It was like 0.4%, which was a lower probability than when the Patriots came back from 23 or 28-3.
wow.
And I was like, wow, that seems kind of strange. But the way that it was, they punted. They didn't have a whole lot of timeouts. They had to stop them. If they got one first down, the game was over. And the way that they did that, the way that they played against Dallas, the way that they played against Green Bay, it just felt like. And then there's all this talk about a takeover, right, in LA for the NFC Championship game.
Mhm.
And it was just like, man, this is odd. It just feels like this is going to happen. And obviously it didn't, but it was a tremendous season.
Did you
I
watch?
will.
Oh, good.
I'm sorry. I will never use the word destiny. A team of destiny again. Not after this
Jaded.
season.
It's jaded
Right.
now.
Well, I mean, yeah. As far as Bills, you probably felt like that as well. I mean,
Yeah.
right? Especially after the way last year happened. Did you guys watch both the Packer game and then this game together as well?
We didn't watch the Packer game together. His son
Okay.
had a basketball game, but he was texting me the whole time. I'm pretty sure he was watching on the phone more than he was watching his son. Hopefully his son's not watching this. But
Well,
we watched.
in a basketball game, they switch them. They have to bench them for a minute so
Yeah.
they can rest up. So there's
Yeah.
some opportunities in there.
I like how you have to, bring that up and no, yeah, no, I'm still good. But we watched the other games together. We watched the Cowboy game together. We watched the NFC Championship game together. And I'm pacing around. There must be a wear mark in my carpet from just pacing back and forth because I'm going, okay, this is going good. They missed a field goal. We're getting some things. It was such a tight game. And
Mhm.
that's the thing, kind of about the Niners this year, that as I kind of look back on it, and especially in the playoffs, it felt like there was not a lot of room for error.
Mm.
And when you're talking about really good teams, like even the Chiefs, or you're talking about the Bills, you're talking about these offensive teams, feels like they can get away with some things, that they're going to
Mhm.
put up 30. And that they're going to do that. With the way that the 49ers played this year, you knew that their defense was tough. You knew
Mhm.
they were going to run the ball, but there's not a lot of room for error when you play that brand of football sometimes. And so when you have some things that don't go your way, it becomes difficult to win
Yeah,
those things.
absolutely. And with that, then, obviously, you talk about Kyle Shanahan, throughout the year. I mean, he's known for running. He's known also for having a doghouse.
Mhm.
Um, you were worried. Were you trusting him in that situation? And then, kind of going forward, do you trust Kyle Shanahan to make the right decisions?
Absolutely. I actually have a lot of faith in Kyle Shanahan. Um, I'd say the biggest reason is because I've seen what it's like not with Kyle Shanahan.
Mm.
We had
Mhm.
Jim Tomsula, we had Chip Kelly. I loved having Jim Harbaugh there, but there was some issues that I had with him.
Mhm.
Really, I became a 49er fan when I was a kid. So his dad was the offensive coordinator, when we won our last Super Bowl. So I
Mhm.
remember that really vividly. He was a ball
Mhm.
boy during that time. He's got a
Mhm.
lot of really good ties to the franchise. I love the way that he's aggressive. Sometimes I wish he'd be a little bit more aggressive, but then there's times like in the Arizona game in week 5, he went for it on fourth down probably 5 times consecutively. And I was thinking maybe he shouldn't have done that. But
Mhm.
it's always, in those situations, it's only hindsight is 2020 when it goes bad and we talk about that, right? But when
I don't know if this is your buddy here. He says Kyle blew it once again. So,
here's the thing. There's a lot of talk about that 4th and 2, right?
mhm.
But what happened was they were thinking about going for it, and he mentioned it in his press conference today. But the problem on the third down play was there was a loss of yards. It was
Mm.
a 2nd and 1. They tried to run use check up the middle, and it was actually a loss of about 1.5. So it was almost like a 4th and 3. And the
Mhm.
way that Rams front was playing, and do you want to give Stafford a chance from the midfield with a 3-point lead that you have? And then, mind you, we probably wouldn't even be talking about this if we catch that interception that happens almost on the ensuing play, right?
Mhm.
So I think it was
Smart,
the right
right?
call. You have a really good
Yeah.
defense. And I think it was the right call not to be overly aggressive in that spot, because I've seen him do that in 2019 against the Ravens. Okay, we got to go for it. And then they go for it, they miss it. The Ravens bled the clock all the way, went down and kicked a field goal. And it was like, okay, well, we should have punted. We're only talking about it because it didn't work out. But most of the time, his offenses are in the top 10. You see the running backs, it doesn't matter where they're coming from, are able to run like crazy. The way that he was able to use Debo, we've never seen. That was innovative in this brand of football, right? So we saw that. You see how George Kittle plays and how that offensive line, they're in a really good spot. The way that they're able to draft and things like that. So I 100% trust him into that, because I've seen us pull those games out too.
Well, absolutely. And we'll get into the Debo stuff real quick, but another comment from Josh here. Where was the change up in play calling when they can't convert the possession after possession? And was Kittle underutilized?
Yeah. So Kittle last 5 weeks didn't really do a whole lot. But when you look at it, and when you look at kind of the all 22, well, there's a reason for that, is because they're guarding on Kittle. There's a reason Brandon Ayuk started having the role that he had. There's a reason that Debo was continuing to have his success. There's so much of Kittle over the middle, so to speak, of where Jimmy likes to throw the ball, that there's a lot of areas. Now, he missed some throws to Kittle in those playoff games too, and missed those opportunities. But, realistically, when it starts to get, down there in the last 8, 7, 6 minutes, in a playoff game, those decisions are magnified. And when they don't work out in your favor, your question about it. And unfortunately, the last 2 playoff appearances in the Super Bowl and the NFC Championship game, it was almost identical the way that it worked out, the opposite favor for us. 10-point lead, and just some things happened. But there's another reason on that the last drive. The center's hiking the ball when nobody else is going, and now there's pressure. So I don't think it just falls on that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that went wrong, and unfortunately, it didn't work out.
Well, yeah, and kind of to that Debo stuff, was it just kind of, the Rams were kind of taken away, or what happened to Debo in the second half?
Yeah, I don't think that they weren't trying to draw stuff up for him. I just think it really from that 4th and 2 play before that. So I think it was about 12 minutes left when he caught, I think it was like a 12-yard pass, took us right past midfield. Then right after that, Elijah Mitchell has that 9-yard run, gets us the 2nd and 1. And then we're talking about that 4th down scenario. Well, the Rams take up a lot of clock to go down and kick the game, kick the field goal that they did, right? And I want to say that ended up, that tied the game. So when we got the ball back, tie score, it was the worst offensive series I had. It was 3 and out. And one of those plays was a negative play when Alex Mack snapped the ball, and nobody was ready for the ball to be snapped. But all of a sudden the crowd noise is going crazy. And it was just a series that you just crumple up and you throw away. And then we get the ball back with 1:47, and now we're down. And then nothing happened on that. So I don't really like, when you look at it and how the sequence of events that happened, I don't think that they weren't trying to get him the ball. I just think that the opportunities weren't there. I think that they only ran like 9 plays, maybe like even 7 plays. And in some of those situations, it just wasn't there. They weren't going to run him the ball, especially with 1:43 left in that last drive. And then with that 3 and out, I know that they got behind the stick, so it's hard to run it then. So I just think the opportunity and the type of plays that need to be called in that time frame, it just couldn't happen for Debo. And obviously, that's not the brand that they want to play, is behind the sticks and having Jimmy drop back and throw against that Rams front. That's not what they wanted to do, and obviously the Rams took advantage of it.
Absolutely. And kind of, moving into that comment about throwing it away. What were you thinking on kind of that last play for the Niners? I mean, he was trying to do something, throw it away. I mean, and then, that as a Niner fan, do you want them to kind of throw him away or kind of trade him and move on to Trey Lance for next year?
Yeah. I'm a big Jimmy guy. I really like his completion percentage. He does put us in a lot of positions to succeed. Now, there's times where he turns over the ball. Now, here's the thing. He's not a top 5 quarterback. I know that, but he is a good one. you know what
qu-
you're going to get. You know
I,
what you're
a,
going to get with him.
a quick question, kind of
Yeah.
as I'm kind of thinking, would you take Derek Carr over Jimmy G?
No.
Interesting. What about
So
you?
here's the reason why that I really like Jimmy
Yeah.
is his release. He's got one of the quickest
Ah.
releases that I've ever seen. And there's times where he's got a guy right in his face and he's able to get that ball out where maybe another quarterback can't. Now on that last play,
Mhm.
I mean, what do? You got Aaron Donald right there. You know
Yeah.
that if you take the sack, the clock's going to keep going. I know that they
Oh,
still had a timeout, right?
yeah.
But it's going to be 4th and 15 at least. And so he's just trying to avoid the sack. And there was a guy there, hits him right in the hands,
Yeah.
and it goes over his head. So I understand it. That one's kind of hard to say, all right, Jimmy, you got to try to throw it away or just take the sack. I know he got away with it a couple different times of where he actually had the most pocket presence I've ever seen him in that game where he was throwing the ball away. And I go, oh my God, he threw the ball away. That's good. But as far as Trey Lance goes, I think it's time to move on from Jimmy for a couple different reasons. First reason is his salary cap. The 49ers only have $5.6 million going into 2022 with 22 free agents that they need to re-sign. And that's anticipating a $208 million cap. So they're up against it. So you can't go through this scenario again, right? I don't think it would be right for Jimmy, and I don't think it'd be right for Trey. So you try to, trade him, obviously, if you can get something back for him. I don't know what that will be, but you try to put yourself in a spot where you can re-sign some of those free agents. But also Trey's got to play at some point. He's got to go out there and get the experience. And he sat for a year. Okay, let's get him out there. And I think that you got to set him up. I don't think that there's a better situation in the NFL for a young quarterback right now. You got a good defense. You got a really good play caller. You got a really good offensive line. You got a good run game. Like if you were going to ask for something for a young quarterback, those are the things that you would ask for. And he's got that. So I think with all those things considered, as painful as it is, and I'm wearing my black Jimmy G is kind of the funeral for him today. But I think it's time to move on. I think it'd be right by Jimmy, and I think it'd be right for Trey, and overall the best move for the team.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they're saying all the right things that, financially they could, keep him and, trying to keep it close to the vest. But yeah, I mean, they'd save over like $25.5 million if they, traded him. So it'll be interesting to see kind of the trade market that's there. And I mean, look, I mean, we've seen, Deshaun Watson try to get traded now, Jimmy G's not at that level. I mean, but you definitely get something for him. I mean, he's there's definitely some limitations to his game, right? I don't know if he's as good at the deep ball, if he, throws as much as, harder as some of these other quarterbacks, but he is definitely a competent, winning starter in this league, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is. I mean, you look at his win percentage, and I know that there's an argument to be made. Well, that's not a quarterback stat. Well, if we're going to talk about Super Bowl wins, then you got to talk about their win percentage. Then, like, you can't have it both ways.
Yep.
There's not a lot of people on planet Earth that can throw the ball the way that he can. The way that you have these. I mean, we've seen. Baker Mayfield came in as a number 1 overall pick, and he's struggling. So there's a market for quarterbacks that are out there.
Absolutely.
And I know that there's Jimmy G slander, I guess that you could say that he's not one of these top guys. You're not going to get a lot for him. But if I remember last year, Wentz got a pretty good package.
He did.
Package for Carson Wentz.
I get, Dawson here saying Jimmy G is quarterback purgatory.
Yeah. And there's limitations to him. Absolutely. And that's kind of what I was alluding to of, you can play winning football with him, but you got to have X, Y, and Z. You got to have a good run game. You got to have good defense. He can still win, and he's not going to be the guy that's going to throw it 45 times, but there's not a lot of people on earth that can do that either.
I kind of want to go back to the Derek Carr comparison.
Yeah.
I'm taking Derek. I'm sorry, my friend.
Really?
Yeah.
His wife's a Raiders fan, so
all right.
She's a Raiders fan.
Gotta get that out there, yeah.
But watching him, he loses his number 1 receiver this year. He lost his coach this year, and he continued. He essentially carried the team. He's throwing passes to Zay Jones, a Buffalo Bills cast-off, when they had nobody on the roster to begin with, and he still couldn't stay on that roster. So I just think with what he had around him and what he's done in the past, he is a clutch guy, kind of along the same lines with Garoppolo as far as sometimes he's, going to give those turnovers. I think he's one of the tops in fumbles actually, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting coming from a quarterback that doesn't really run.
Mhm.
So that might be
Mm.
more of an issue with the offensive line. But at the end of the day, I think I'm sorry, I'm taking Carr on that one.
The best part of this entire argument
That's
is that we haven't had a chance to see what he's really like outside of Kyle Shanahan. We saw a brief snippet of, I think, 2 games in New England of what he could do. And so we really saw the product of him under Kyle Shanahan. I'm actually excited to see him somewhere else to see what he does, because that's where that argument will either, have some validity or to be put to bed. If he goes somewhere else with maybe nothing else, then you look back and go, oh my gosh, why is he doing all these things? Maybe it was Kyle Shanahan. Or he completely falls on his face and they go, oh wow, well, I mean, obviously it was Kyle Shanahan that was holding him up. So we'll see for sure.
Yeah,
Derek Carr, he's had a number of different things where we could compare, a lot more seasons. He's older. He's had a million different things go on where the reason that they are really moving on from Jimmy to begin with wasn't his ability. It was more his availability. When you have a 5-year, I think it was $125 million contract, and in the 4 years, you're only available in 2 of them. That's tough.
yeah.
That's tough to live with because their record without him is like 8-29. So
yeah.
you can't do that again, really.
And we're talking about 2 quarterbacks that might be on 2 different teams next year too for both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a
True.
reason for it, right? Everybody wants
Yeah.
those Josh Allens. They want those Patrick Mahomes. They want those guys, and everybody's searching for them. And there's just not a lot of them that
There's
exist.
not. No.
What about Mitch Trubisky, Ronnie?
I do think he's a better quarterback than he was given credit for in Chicago.
Yeah,
I believe he did have a winning record, in fact, with them.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited to see where he goes. I wouldn't be shocked if he follows Dayball and battles with Daniel Jones for that job. And I think he could beat him out. But I'm excited to see where he goes. I do know he came to Buffalo last year as a free agent, took less money because he wanted the opportunity to learn from that coaching staff and see if they could do for him what they did for Allen.
Don't put him behind that New York Giants offensive line.
Oh, that's a great point too. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but at least he can move though. Well, Daniel Jones can too, but we'll see.
Well, and it obviously depends on who they draft. I think that's going to be interesting. And, and looking at kind of, go back to the 49ers, what do they need most going into 2022?
I mean, it's almost a layup to say secondary. I really think that the way that people or teams were trying to attack the 49ers, that they have a really good pass rush. And once Jason Verrett went down, which, by the way, when you're holding on to Jason Verrett not going down, that's a little bit of an issue because he's a good player when he's available, but much like Jimmy, when he's not, it hurts the team, especially in one of those positions. So I think they need to go out and get a corner. I do like Emmanuel Mosley that they have there. Ambry Thomas started to come on, but I think they just need some more depth, some more guys that are available, a safety potentially. I know Jaquaski Tart is one of our free agents, so it's going to be interesting to see if they retain him because he's from the old regime. So he was one of the guys, him and Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward's going to be there another year, so I'm curious to see what they do there. But then I also think interior offensive line. Alex Mack, he's an older center. I don't even know if he's going to come back. He's already mentioned that he's going to take his normal process and think about it. And then you had Daniel Brunskill at the right guard. And going back to 2019, even in that Super Bowl, that was a huge area where Kansas City was able to expose that offensive line. Laken Tomlinson on the left guard was he's a free agent, so I'm sure that they're gonna try to re-sign him. He's mentioned that he wants to come back, so that interior offensive line definitely needs to be addressed. They're good on tackle with Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey, so they're gonna need that, and I think secondary will be big.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that line. Obviously, with what Shanahan wants to do, I think that's important with the running game, and going to that running game and someone coming back. What do you see happening with Raheem Mostert? Is he still under contract for next year?
No, so he's going to be a free agent.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he's such an interesting guy because we've seen what he can do. He's a difference maker when he's healthy. He can really outrun angles. Like it almost looks weird on tape because you'll see a guy coming for him and he just blazes right past him. And you're like, how was that a touchdown? That's like a weird touchdown that just happened. So that is going to be, I think they'll be able to get him back. I would like to see him back because I think they would have a really good stable of backs with him and Elijah Mitchell. Obviously, they're going to use Trey Lance in the running game. I think that would be huge. And you add Debo to that mix and Jeff Wilson there. All of a sudden, that's pretty scary. The only thing with Raheem for me is the same thing with Jimmy. It's the same thing with Jason Verrett. It's the health. He only played one game for us this year. It was actually a quarter, and he goes down. He was only supposed to be out 8 weeks, but then he elected for a surgery to take him out the whole season so he could fix the issue and not have it reoccur. So that's a big red flag for me. I know that he's not getting any younger either. So he's kind of been around for a while. I think he's approaching 30 as well. So I would like to see him back on a kind of team-friendly deal. I think he would do really well with Shanahan. I wouldn't mind that at all. And we see what he does with running back. So I would be fine to have him come back. But they would have to sign him in free agency, and I'm sure that there's a market for him.
Still have Sermon there too.
Yeah, that's Sermon that is weird what happened there. I mean, you thought he was going to be kind of the guy to emerge, and then Mitchell comes out of nowhere, but Mitchell's got to be the guy, right?
Yeah, what's really funny is last year's draft, I almost felt like they were drafting for 2022. I didn't feel like they were drafting for 2021 because Trey Sermon isn't your normal Shanahan back, at least from 2017, 2018, where he had these 4-3 guys. Sermon's not a 4-3 guy. He's a downhill runner. And they also drafted Aaron Banks out of Notre Dame, who's not your normal agile guard that's going to get out there and run the zone scheme. He's more of a, combo, take out the nose tackle, go on up to the linebacker type of downhill power scheme. So it makes me wonder a little bit of what their plans are with Trey, because those two guys didn't really fit the Shanahan scheme with Jimmy. I think they'll fit it more with Trey. So I actually think that Trey Sermon will have more of an opportunity with Trey Lance than he had with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Absolutely. The NFL is exciting. It's tough when our teams lose, but it's always exciting then to look forward to next year. The things when the things that you need and then just how the landscape will change and has been changing. And I just one quote here, and obviously La Sweat here. Everyone's just lucky Lamar and the Ravens weren't in the playoffs. I had to throw that in there. Obviously health wise, Lamar's got to stay healthy. I don't know in the AFC if you're worried about that at all, Ronnie.
Not really. Sorry.
No,
Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson to me is a great running back who can throw when guys are wide open. I just don't see him necessarily as a quarterback. Can they win with him? In the regular season, yeah, he's got one playoff win. I haven't seen the clutch gene in him, and even going back to his days in Louisville, yeah, he could put up some great numbers in Louisville, and but when they faced some of the bigger opponents, they couldn't get it done, and so that's kind of where I am with Lamar Jackson, and Buffalo's defense has done a great job against him every time they faced him too.
Yeah, I think, you put for me, quarterbacks in this league have to be able to throw. That's where their money's made. Yeah. And I know that he's made progress on it, but I think, what are we going into? He's getting ready to actually get a contract extension, right? So I think we're going on into year 4 of Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. I would hope to have seen more progress from him being able to throw the ball. We know that he's an excellent runner and he can do those things, and that makes him a special player. And you can scheme things open for him throwing the ball. But when a team is going to force him to throw, keep him in the pocket. They did that to Michael Vick, and he had to learn how to do it. I think we're starting to see that a little bit more with Lamar Jackson. I think he can get there, but it's just not going to be what we hope that it's going to be. And ultimately, he's not going to get faster. He's going to start to kind of slow down as he gets older too.
Well, yeah, and his talking about Lamar Jackson makes me think of John Harbaugh, who took a risk on him, which then is a great segue to former Bears quarterback, former 49ers coach. What are each of your thoughts on Jim Harbaugh coaching in the NFL? Again, it's rumored that basically he's getting the Vikings job. So what are your thoughts on him back in the NFL?
Want to take that one, Ronnie?
Yeah. So for me, I'm a big Michigan guy. I've been
Yeah.
a Michigan Wolverines fan for a long, long time.
I'm a
And
Hawkeye, obviously you can see.
yes,
So.
I noticed that. So when Michigan hired Rich Rodriguez as their head coach years back, I was like, that's not a good.
Yeah, that was
It's
not
just
good.
it's not Michigan at all.
Mhm.
And so when he came on board and they hired him, I was like, okay, he's an old school guy. He's going to bring back that old school football back to Michigan, play some defense, run the ball, and that's what Michigan does, and that's what they've always done. And so I was excited to see him come back. As far as coming back into the NFL, for that reason, I hope he doesn't leave Michigan. But I think he's a good coach. Uh, I It's going to be interesting to see if his style can survive in the NFL because it is becoming a very much a passer league, and depending on where he goes, the Vikings they've got Dalvin Cook. They also have some really good receivers there. So he's going to have some weapons to work with. It'll be interesting to see if it is the Vikings, if he sticks with more of his running game, or if he does start to kind of change his style a bit to fit better with what he'll have there.
Yeah, he's a really good coach. I mean, obviously, wherever
Mhm.
he's been, he's won, and there's a reason for that. But I also think there's a reason that everywhere he's been, it hasn't been for long. He's a very high intensity, passionate coach, and you love that about him. My hope for him is I think the Vikings are a very good fit because I think that persona of that NFC North, the way that I think he fits into that. He knows what it was like with the Bears. Obviously, when he was there with the Niners, it's all about tough defense, run the football type of attitude, type of brand of football that I think the Vikings need. So I think for that, it'll be a really good fit. The worry that I have with him is him and Trent Baalke didn't get along when he was in San Francisco. And
Mhm.
it became in year 4 a huge boiling point where Jim ended up leaving, and then it ended up kind of destroying our franchise for a while because Trent Baalke ended up leaving. There was a whole lot of other variables in that too. I don't think Trent was a very good GM as far as draft picks and things like that. But as far as the relationship goes with a high intensity guy, if you
Mhm.
don't know him and you don't have a really good relationship with him, I think it could wear potentially thin at times. So my hope is the GM that's there that they understand that they're able to get along. I think they will for a while. Wins usually fix a lot of things.
Mhm.
But I think at Stanford, he was there for 4 years. He was there for 4 years for the 49ers. And I know we might be just a little bit on the outside of that at the University of Michigan. So my hope would be that he would actually be able to stay and have a long career there in Minnesota rather than 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, tell you, I mean, it'll be interesting because obviously with a younger first-time general manager, but then obviously the rumors are now that no one really wants to work with Baalke in Jacksonville. So I mean, that could have been him. But I think
Yeah.
you are right. Going back to Harbaugh's playing days, it didn't end well with the Bears either. So he has that fiery personality, which is good for a little while. And I guess then my question is, as a 49er fan, and maybe this is a slam dunk question, but would you rather have Harbaugh or Shanahan as coach?
That's tough because they're two different styles,
Right.
really. I like Shanahan because of how progressive thinking he is in today's game.
Hmm.
What I'm actually curious about with Harbaugh is the last time that he coached in the NFL was it 2013? If you go back and watch 2013 NFL football, it's drastically different. The pads are even bigger, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the NFL scheme wise and how
Mhm.
teams are defending certain things. Back then, I mean, you had Patrick Willis and you had Navarro Bowman, I think they're great players. I think they would have a very hard time covering a Travis Kelce over the middle with how big they were. And you don't see linebackers that are that big anymore. Fred Warner for the Niners, I think he's 225 pounds. He's not that big. So it's a
Mhm.
different game. So I'm going to go more on the edge of Kyle Shanahan because of the progressive thinking that he is. But if you had to choose between those guys, I don't know if there's a wrong answer, to be honest, either.
It's
Yeah,
okay. You can. Go ahead.
That would be my concern with Harbaugh too. Is can he
Yeah.
adapt to the game
Yeah.
today?
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's okay. You can say you miss your ex-girlfriend. That's all right.
Yeah, maybe I'll see. I'm seeing what she's doing over there in Michigan there for a while. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I've had to hate him for a little while.
Right.
So yeah, it's one of those things. But no, I Shanahan, I think he just has a culture that is going to be able to be more. I mean, you hear about how close that locker room was. I just
Yeah.
remember with the Niners when Harbaugh was there, there was guys getting arrested all the time. And for whatever
Right.
reason, I don't know if you want to put on the coach, if you want to put on the GM, but it just didn't seem like that was something that was going to be able to be sustainable. And that's what I'm about, is to try to be able to create something where it's not just here and now, like what the Rams are doing. I don't know if they have a draft pick while I'm alive, you know. So they
Yeah.
they do it a different way, and
Yeah.
we'll see. But I like the culture as well in the locker room, and Shanahan stands for that as well.
It'll be interesting to see, obviously, what Harbaugh can do. And obviously, D-Lo 187 says Jim Harbaugh is going to make Kellen Mond a badass. And yeah, when the previous coaching regime didn't even want to see him in a game, that was. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I want to know who he's going to bring in as his coordinators. That's going to be another big thing. He
Mm-hmm.
had the Baltimore coordinator right now. Oh gosh, it's escaping me. But he
Tyler
had
Huntley.
no the
Coordinator.
offensive coordinator.
The coordinator. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had him with Kaepernick. Gosh, I cannot think of
Oh.
his name. It's driving me nuts. But I'm wondering who's going to be able to bring in, if it's going to be some people from his Michigan staff, or is it going to be some other coordinators that are out there? I think that'll be a big piece of the puzzle.
Interesting. Yeah. It obviously, Harbaugh is a big name, and I got to tell you, listening to Chicago radio as a Bears fan, that was kind of the slam dunk. Everybody would have, that would have been the head coaching hire that everyone would have loved. But I was kind of sitting back and looking at that too. Number one, it didn't end well when he was playing his playing days before he moved on to the Colts. But yeah, I mean, he has kind of moved on, and you want to have that sustained success, and you look at the 49ers, and that's kind of what they've done, and then even looking back to the Bills, that's what the Bills have done. And as a Bears fan, when we were kind of looking for coaches, that's kind of what we tried to look at the Bills model, 49ers model, but you want to have that sustained success in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you're starting to see a little bit more of a trend now is GMs and coaches getting hired together, where John Lynch and Shanahan did that, but then you started to see that even as we kind of have gone through. Even this year, they've kind of started to pair some of those folks up. Not everybody, but you've seen it more often than you had, and I think there's a reason for that. That people are looking for that sustained success, and you want a GM that's going to have a vision of how you're going to cook the meal, because they're going to be buying the groceries for you. And when those two things are different, that's usually where a lot of things have gone bad for a lot of teams. So I think people are more on page with that these days.
Yeah, Giants are a good example of that. Yeah, as soon as I can't pronounce his last name, it's Shane.
I think. Is it Shane?
As soon as he got that job, we knew Dayball was going.
Well, yeah, and it's going to be interesting. You kind of look at the coaching landscape, and you just kind of knew that obviously there was that connection there.
Yeah. So with Joe learning from Brandon Bean, obviously, and seeing what Brandon Bean has been able to do with the organization and the roster he's built there, so he takes a lot of that over there. He's been working with Dayball pretty closely as well. It was like a natural transition for both of them to go over there together. And I'm pretty sure that when he got there, Dayball was probably his number one guy. Either him or Frazier was kind of the toss up between the two of them. So it's going to be interesting. And I'm kind of excited for the Giants. I'm not a Giants fan by any means, but for those two guys, I want to see them be successful and go forward. One of the things that I did see not on Twitter not too long ago, a few days ago after Dayball got hired, somebody listed out all these quarterbacks that Dayball has worked with in the past. None of them amounted to anything other than Josh Allen. But at the same time, find me a coach that wasn't a great coach without a great quarterback. It just the
Mhm.
talent and the coach, it's got to come together at the
Mhm.
right time. And I don't know if Daniel Jones is that guy. Maybe Dayball can develop him too. But there's a lot of other pieces in Josh Allen's past that helped develop him other than Dayball as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. So before the Chiefs game, I had a chance to interview, obviously, a podcaster for the Bills, and I because that was before we knew the head coach for the Bears, and so I said, who would be the better head coach, Dable or Frazier? And he said Frazier. And I don't know, is Frazier going to be coming back, or is he definitely gone?
I I haven't heard anything as far as so we heard that Chicago might have made him an option. We heard the Giants might have been an option. I don't think he's going to go anywhere, honestly.
Yeah,
And I do wonder too because there were some possibilities, some options out there for him. But I do kind of wonder if maybe what happened in the Chiefs game maybe soured some owners a little bit, possibly.
yeah, yeah,
You never know. I know Frazier's been a head coach before. There's a reason why he's not now,
yep.
but these guys do learn, they gain more experiences, and they can take that next step. Just like a quarterback, they can take that next step and become a successful head coach. I don't think that happens this year, though. I do think Frazier's coming back.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I could talk all night football with you guys. I definitely appreciate you guys coming on. Where can everyone find you again?
So we are on Twitter at the Peebcast. We also have a Facebook page at the Peebcast as well, and of course, Brandon and I both have our individual Twitter pages as well. I'm at Ronnie Eastham. He is at
People
Peebler22.
22.
Yeah, I had to
Yep.
think about it.
Yeah, and you can find our podcast wherever you like to get your podcasts. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Google Podcasts. Those are usually the big three. So you can find us. Just
Mhm.
search the Peebcast. You'll be able to find us. We right now we're recording twice a week, so we're Monday and Friday, and we're going to go. We're all season around, so we're going to talk through free agency. We're going to talk through the draft. We're going to go all the way through and just keep talking football because, like you mentioned, it's always a great day when you get to talk football.
There's some great storylines out there too this offseason. It's going to be
Oh
fun.
man, I don't. It's going to get juicy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thanks again, guys. And once again, this has been an NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Bills and the 49ers, and we'll definitely catch your podcast. And obviously, best of luck for all of our teams next year, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Until we play each other,
Yeah.
for whoever that is, right?
Thanks again, guys.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.